guys, in this video I want to talk about property management. Should you hire one? Should you not hire one? What's the benefits? What's the downsides of them? And my experience with them just starting out as we hired property management for our investment property as we moved away from Utah. So we've had a rental property for about 2.5 years in Omaha, Nebraska, in the neighborhood called Benson. And for the last 2.5 years, once we bought it, we've been self-managing. We lived in Omaha. We didn't live too far away from the rental. So we thought, hey, let's cut out the expense of hiring a property manager. Let's do it ourselves. Let's learn. It was our first investment, pure investment property. And we wanted to kind of figure out how to manage it and be a big part of it. We wanted to maximize our money, and we wanted to kind of learn how to manage a property on our own. As we're moving, I think that me and my wife both felt that it was best to hire out a property manager. We're not in the area, we can't handle simple things anymore. We do have a network of contractors that we worked with, which was great, and I think that there was a part of us that wanted to continue to handle it, but with moving to Utah, being about 1,000 miles away, it would just be a lot harder. Those little things came up that we weren't able to handle, and we'd have to get somebody to do it anyways. So we came to the conclusion to hire property management. Going through the process of looking up, I think the best way to find one is to talk to other agents or other investors and see who they're using and why, and what relationship they have with them, what they charge, what services they provide. So that's where we went. Reached out to a few investors, a few agents that I know that have investment properties, and found out who I should call and talk to about property management. During the process, there's some things that I think that you should be asking the property management as you go through that interview process with them. One is their approach with tenant placement, how they post it, where they post it, their tenant screening, their application process, and then onboarding. The tenant placement, like what criteria they require for tenants, what they're looking for in criminal background, rental background, stuff like that. Making sure that you're finding the best quality tenant for that property. After you go through that, then you'll want to go through kind of like what their relationship with the owner is. Do they have a portal? What kind of software do they use? What kind of reports do they send you monthly? If they have a cap as far as repairs, whatever price point that is. We decided to use about $250. Anything under that, if a tenant calls and they need something fixed, if it's under $250, just go ahead and handle it. If it's above that, then they would need to reach out to us for approval, and we would just see those expenses at the end of the month when they send their P&L to us. And then just their general relationship to property management. Like, what is their goal? Their goal should be to maximize owner profits. So maximizing rent, finding other ways to include the tenant in costs, like lawn care, snow removal. Do the tenants handle air filters? Do the tenants handle water filters? Stuff like that. So seeing that was a big part of their goal was a big factor in who we were going to hire. If it was just, we're just going to throw somebody in there and we're going to hold them to the lease, that wasn't necessarily enough. We wanted them to do a bigger analysis on what is going to maximize this property's potential, how are we going to get the most quality tenant in there so that you don't want a problem tenant who's going to call when every little thing happens. You want somebody that feels like a little bit more responsible, is going to handle the things, going to stick to the lease. They're not going to continue to question the lease and push the boundaries of that. Who makes stable income? They're not on a job that's seasonal or just at that threshold that you agreed upon as far as income to rent ratio. And then how do they handle the lease throughout the year? What is their process for hiring contractors? What is their process for evictions, if it ever comes to that? Rent collection. If rent is late, where is their escalation going? Like, are they sending out penalties? And then tenant turnover. Like, how do they avoid vacancy? So when I went through the process, sat down with a couple property managers, started asking those questions. And I was really impressed with this one property management because they were real estate agents, they were also investors, and then they also had their property management. So they saw all sides of this business, and they understood all the facets that came with it, and what was most important to owners that wanted to hire them. And their biggest goal was maximizing owner profit, and it really showed that that's what they cared about by the process that they built. They had great software that tenants could log into, submit maintenance requests, all communication with tenants. They processed and replied to maintenance requests within 48 hours. They're available nights and weekends. They have inbound and outbound checklists for tenants to make sure that the property is in decent condition, and if they found any things that were beyond maybe their deposit. So that was what really impressed me most about them. Communication is huge, and drawing the lines of what falls into their scope, what falls into the owner's scope, what falls into the tenant's scope. They had a huge checklist that they went through and visually inspected the property, went very thorough through the property to make sure that they documented every nook and cranny as far as what was broken, what might have been already chip paint, dents in walls, stuff like that. Stuff that's all documented so that we're not holding the tenant accountable for things that might have been wrong. We're also holding the prior tenant accountable so that if they leave, hey, we can show you, hey, these are some of the things that we had to fix that are coming out of your deposit, or whatever the case may be. So once we hired them, I had tenants that they're ending their lease at the end of the month, and my thoughts were, hey, let's give 2 weeks between when they leave and when the next tenants come in. That'll give us time to clean, that'll give us time to perform any maintenance, do touch-up paint, stuff like that, just get the property ready for the next tenants. Their approach was much more aggressive, and I appreciate that because their processes were so cut and dry, and they've done this so many times that they're getting a tenant in the day after my current tenants leave, which I thought was very aggressive, but they also made me feel really comfortable that it was going to be fine and that everything was going to be taken care of for the next tenant, so they feel comfortable and that the property is ready for their arrival. Communication, though. When you're an owner, you're not in that area any longer. You don't really know what's happening with your property. This is the first time that we've done it, so not really, we're still uneasy about not seeing our property. We've always been next to it or close to it. We've always been able to do periodic check-ins and just walk the property if needed and make sure that it was in good shape. But being away, like, how do I continue to keep that level of visibility while not being there? And that's something that we've worked out with the property management. We're doing quarterly walkthroughs with pictures and video so that we see that it's still in good shape. And that also holds the tenants accountable. They know that the walkthroughs come in every quarter. They need to keep the house in good order. I'm not talking about laundry not being put away and dishes in the sink and the house generally being messy, that people can live however they want to live. It is the property being taken care of, as far as is the lawn getting taken care of. So I still want to maintain a good appearance for the neighborhood and people aren't complaining because grass is overgrown or whatever the case is. Structurally, are things not broken? Leaks, dents in the wall, holes in the wall, whatever. And everything's just in decent shape so that we're not managing larger issues down the line, and we're catching them before they become a bigger issue. So talking to them, making sure that they're available nights and weekends, making sure that obviously I'm available, and then seeing that they have a larger vendor list. So if tenants have issues, especially on those off hours, real estate is where people live. It's not business hours when things go wrong. It's generally outside of business hours. Do you have quality contractors that are going to be able to handle emergencies if they arise? Seeing that they have that process, and I'm going to keep going back to that because they have such a structured process that is shown to be so effective that it seemed very seamless for us to dive in with them and just get right into their flow. And they're not starting from scratch or letting me kind of pick and choose. They do. They let me pick and choose on some areas as far as the price point for maintenance and stuff like that, and obviously what goes into the lease. But the process that they built really made me feel a lot more comfortable handing that over to them. The tenant placement, when we first listed our house, and this was, new investors, you don't know what you don't know. So we took pictures with our iPhone, posted it on Facebook, posted it on Zillow, and that yielded a lot of underqualified tenants. And we were also entertaining everybody that called. We bought this property. We were also renting at the time. We didn't want to float a rent and mortgage for too long, so we were almost, trying to rush it or force it. So anybody that called, if they wanted to see the property, I was immediately jumping over there, showing them the property, and then I would direct them to fill out an application if they liked it. The way that property management did it is, if they were interested, based on the pictures and the descriptions that they posted on their website, and they also did post it on Zillow and some of the other websites like that, if you're interested, you need to submit an application. You have to pay the application fee, go through the background check, verify income, and until that is done, you're not seeing the property. Because it's a waste of time, and it's not something that I realized until after, because we were just scrambling to try to get something in, because we didn't know how long it generally takes, what we should expect as far as how fast somebody should get in. We were trying to get somebody in as fast as possible, and I think that we were even bending our standards as far as income verification and background issues, stuff like that. Initially going through that tenant placement process. With the property management, they took the pictures that we had, which made me a little nervous because they weren't professional photos. They were good photos, but you could definitely tell the difference between photos taken on your iPhone and professional photos by a photographer. But they used them, and they said, hey, if it doesn't work, then once the tenants leave, we'll get pictures redone and we'll post them. But they felt comfortable with what we had, that they'd be able to get a quality tenant. So they posted it, and within about 10 days, they had almost 200 inquiries and 30 completed applications, which was far more than what we had the first time. We were getting a lot of calls with people that were unemployed, that were between jobs, that were just moving there, couldn't verify income, that had really low credit scores, stuff like that. And we were, in the spirit of just trying to get somebody in, didn't realize how important it was to get a quality tenant and maybe take a little bit more time to do that, because in the long run, it's going to be far less headaches. You're not going to have to worry about rent getting paid on time. And they just, in their process, they just understood that, and their experience, they've been able to maximize or become very efficient in that. We made a requirement that each tenant needed to make 4 times the rent, so we don't have a concern about them paying. If you do anything less than that, I've seen a lot of people go 3 times the rent, or 2.5 times. I've heard people say that just pushes. That means 2 2.5 times the rent, 3 times the rent. That doesn't leave a ton for bills, other expenses. And then if that person loses their job, how long are they going to be able to float that rent before you stop receiving it, and then you have to go through the eviction process, and then vacancy goes up, trying to get them out of the house and then redo the whole process to get a tenant in. Can be very difficult, financially straining on us. So we wanted, as they went through their process, we were able to get about 6 high quality tenant applications, and we were able to then choose based on a variety of different factors who's going to be the best fit for the property. With our tenants leaving at the end of the month, they were able to move the day after they leave, and the property management was able to coordinate contractors to come in and get the house back up that afternoon. The tenants are leaving in the morning. They're going to coordinate to get things done in the afternoon, and then anything that might not be done, we've already come to an agreement with the new tenants that maintenance people might come in to fix some things to make sure the house is up to par. What they did was they eliminated any vacancy. We'll receive rent on July 1st. We already received June's rent, so there's going to be no vacancy in the house, which is huge for us. And if we did this on our own, we could have had vacancy, and we're also moving, so we're really tied up doing that. So it just made a lot of sense to hire out. The last thing I want to talk about was price point. It's really difficult sometimes to find the correct price point. As we had our tenants in, we set at a price that we thought was reasonable. We weren't pushing, we weren't turning into slumlords, trying to nickel and dime everybody. We wanted to put it at a fair price point for the area and for the house. Once you have tenants in, I think it's really difficult, and they want to stay there a little bit longer term. It's really difficult to want to hike up rent. In the last few years, house prices have gone up, rent prices have gone up dramatically, but you don't want to push them out. If you have quality tenants, it's really difficult, especially if you developed a relationship with them, to try to hike up rent too much and really force them to have to move. The 2.5 years that we've had these renters, the second year they signed that 1-year lease, then they renewed, but at the renewal we raised it $50, which is a small increase, but property taxes went up. We wanted to try to mitigate that burden on us and continue our cash flow on the property. So we raised it $50, but even that $50 increase made them kind of rethink things, and they started looking elsewhere. Fortunately for us, they didn't want to move. They knew their time in Omaha was limited, so they didn't want to go the hassle of moving. So they ended up staying. But it did make us nervous raising rent, that if we do this again, that might be the limit. They might push it out, and if you're going to increase rent, you don't necessarily want to make it a negotiation with the tenants. When we turned over the process to the property management, they immediately set the price. They knew what rent was going for. They had a good analysis on the neighborhood and then the area to put it at a higher price point. So with hiring them, including the property management fees, we're still making more money, about $35 more than we currently are, even with paying the 10% property management fees. And the 10% is 10% of rent collected, so that's including pet fees, any other fees that might be incurred if they wanted to pay for lawn care or whatever the case is. So it's 10%. So we went from renting our 3-bedroom, 2-bath house at $1,425 a month. They raised it to $1,550. The tenants also have pets that we screened and allowed, and that added another $70 a month to that, as well as a non-refundable deposit on top of their normal deposit. So we were able to gain the initial deposit, which I think was about $350, and then we get $70 on top of that. But the pet thing, that was a difficult thing to kind of allow, because we weren't allowing pets at first, but that takes a lot of quality tenants off the table when you do that. So we always now are going to put, pet, our pets are only approved by the landlord or pending approval. It's not automatic. They need to send verification of the size of the pet, how old they are, vaccination records. We want to make sure that they're taking care of their pet and they're not just like, oh, this is our dog, but we don't actually, they're not taking care of it the way it should be taken care of, because it can be indicative of how they're going to take care of your house and what they're going to allow their pet to do. So I wanted to make sure that the pets were in good shape, and that they weren't, they're telling us that it's a 30-pound dog, and then it turns out to be a 120-pound dog, and it's going to do a bunch of damage to our house. So yeah, hiring them, it just ended up making more money than us doing it ourselves. So it turns out to be a benefit for us, especially leaving town. I think that if we stayed in Omaha, we would have continued to self-manage. However, knowing what we know now, we'd still not be making as much money. So it ended up working out financially. The second last thing is that it divides up, by hiring property management, it makes that clear line, and it doesn't allow for any relationship to be built. We hired tenants and we became decently close with them. One of the tenants, she came over and watched my son, babysat, stuff like that, which can be a good thing, but it's also, mixing the lines or blurring the lines between business and friendship, and that can never, it generally doesn't end well. Fortunately for us, it worked out great, because they were super great people. They always paid rent on time. They were very communicative when things went wrong, and they didn't shy away from telling us, which I appreciated. But if things started to go wrong, whether income started to fluctuate and they weren't able to pay rent, that would have put emotional strain on us, because now we've created that relationship. And we recognized that pretty early on, that, man, this could go south. If maybe our friendship started to be strained for whatever factor, or financially they weren't able to pay rent, or stuff started going to the house, wrong with the house, and they started having a bad taste in their mouth about it. It started to blur the lines, and by hiring property management, we basically eliminated that. We're the owner. We obviously have oversight on what things get done, but property management's job is to stop that relationship, or that potential relationship, and they basically stick to the lease. This is now a business relationship only, and they have no problem holding people to the lease, referring to the lease when questions arise, holding people to what is expected as a tenant and what their responsibilities are as far as maintaining the home, and eliminates any possible relationship problems between the owner and the tenants. So I thought that was a huge benefit, and I think that knowing what I know now, even if we do, or when we do start investing in our new location, it is going to be something that we're going to hire in the future, and it's got to be part of your calculations as far as, hey, does this property make sense to invest in? Property management definitely should be something that is included in that, and it's not something, well, it works if I don't hire property management, because at some point life might get difficult, and it might make sense to hire property management because you just can't handle the calls or whatever tasks might need to be handled, or the accounting, and now you have to hire property management, but now that cuts into your cash flow, and maybe you have negative cash flow, and it doesn't actually make sense to hold that property anymore, because I think mortgage pay down and tax depreciation and stuff like that are benefits of investing, but cash flow should be something that should be, I think, number one as far as priority. Does this property cash flow? And because if you're going negative, even if it's a small amount, now it's no longer an asset, it's a liability. It's something that you are paying to keep. You're losing money on month to month, and you're paying, it's coming out of your monthly expenses to hold on to that house. So jumped up. So we got it at a good price, at a good rate. And with rental prices in that area jumping up a little bit higher than what we have it at, we still are able to cash flow almost $300 a month, which is huge, as well as our mortgage pay down and all the other benefits of real estate investing that you get. So I definitely recommend looking into property management, going through some of the questions, seeing what their process is like, making sure you feel comfortable and that you guys are on the same page as far as your priorities, making sure that their priorities are maximizing owner profits, what their tenant screening is like, and their tenant placement, and how they inbound somebody or kind of bring somebody into the property, what their exit process is with tenants leaving, and the communication throughout the year, and the reports that they're able to send as far as maintenance and costs and stuff like that. So if you're looking more into investing, you're not really sure if property management is something that you should do or if you should self-manage to kind of gain experience, reach out, let me know. We talk more about questions that you should be asking your property management, things that you should see in their process, and making sure that it's a good fit.